The new year had barely begun when the first shockwave hit. A 22-year-old model known online as Alina appeared before journalists with a story that sounded like the plot of a dark thriller. She claimed to have survived the notorious Dubai parties, not just wild nights of luxury and excess, but events where violence, coercion, and even ritual killings took place behind locked villa doors. For hours she spoke, her voice steady but her hands shaking, describing scenes that made seasoned reporters fall silent. What was once whispered as rumor now had a face, a voice, and a name, and the world was about to find out just how deep the darkness ran. Before she became the center of an international scandal, Alina was just a girl from a small provincial town. The streets she grew up on were quiet, the kind where everyone knew everyone, and where dreams of bright lights and city life felt almost too big to say out loud. But Alina had that restless fire. She wanted more. At 19, she made a decision that changed everything. She opened an OnlyFans account. At first, it was just a way to pay rent and help her struggling family. She juggled classes, part-time jobs, and late nights creating content. The numbers started small, a handful of subscribers, a few dollars a week, but soon they grew. Notifications buzzed on her phone. Followers doubled, then tripled. Money began to flow. By the time she turned 21, Alina was making more than she ever had in her life. She could afford better clothes, a nicer apartment, weekend trips. The small-town girl had become a young woman with a growing online persona, posting playful pictures that kept her audience hooked. But the more her star rose, the more offers began to pour in, not just from fans, but from agencies promising to take her career to the next level. One of those offers would change everything. A message, then a call, an invitation to Dubai. The promise was simple: a few days at luxury parties, free travel, gifts, and a payout that dwarfed anything she had earned before. It sounded harmless, too good to pass up, and with that, Alina packed her bags, unaware that this was the first step down a road she might never return from. Alina's first trip to Dubai felt like stepping into another world. From the moment she landed, everything seemed designed to impress her. The man waiting at the airport with her name on a sign, the black luxury car with tinted windows, the five-star hotel suite overlooking the glittering skyline. The first few days were a blur of champagne dinners, rooftop parties, yacht cruises under the golden sun. The men she met seemed charming, well-mannered, almost protective. They called her princess, showered her with compliments, and promised her more opportunities if she kept coming back. The only unsettling detail came when her phone was taken before certain private events, the staff smiling politely as they said it was for confidentiality. But no harm came to her. No threats. No violence. Instead, she returned home with expensive gifts, a generous payment, and a head full of glamorous memories. Alina posted photos of city lights and luxury dinners to her fans, who flooded her with hearts and comments calling her lucky. To her, the trip felt like proof that she had made it, that all the rumors about dark Dubai parties were just gossip spread by jealous outsiders. But as she would soon discover, that first trip was just the bait, a carefully staged illusion meant to make sure she'd say yes again. By late summer, Alina's confidence was sky-high. She had gone to Dubai once, come back with money, gifts, and no scars, so when a second invitation arrived, she didn't hesitate. This one felt bigger, more important. The message promised a special status event, higher pay, and a chance to meet even more influential people. For a girl still dreaming of breaking into international modeling, it sounded like the perfect career step. But almost immediately after landing in Dubai this time, the energy was different. There was no smiling driver holding a name card. Instead, a black SUV with tinted windows was waiting. The driver didn't say much, only nodded and motioned for her to get in. The villa where she was taken was nothing like the glittering hotels of her first trip. It was secluded, surrounded by a high stone wall and guarded gates. As soon as she walked through the entrance, she noticed the change. No friendly hosts, no polite introductions. Instead, there were stern-faced guards collecting phones and passports. Alina and the other girls were led to a lounge area where contracts were placed in front of them. Non-disclosure agreements. Fines in the thousands if they tried to leave early. Alina hesitated, feeling a twist of fear in her stomach. The guard's stares told her everything. There was no walking away. "I wanted to leave right then," she later said. "But they told me I'd have to pay a massive penalty. And without my passport or phone, how could I even get to the airport? I felt trapped, like a bird in a cage." They handed her a revealing designer dress and told her simply, "The sheiks are expecting you tonight." No one said what exactly would happen, but the implication was unmistakable. For the first time, Alina's heart started to race with real fear. The dream had cracked, and for the first time she wondered, what had she agreed to? That evening, she stared at herself in the mirror, dressed like a doll, trying to quiet the dread rising inside her. The smiling girl who once flaunted her Dubai trips online was gone. In her place stood someone about to step into the unknown, and she could already sense that this night would change everything. Night fell over the villa like a warning. The air inside felt heavy, almost staged, music playing softly somewhere in the distance, but no one smiling. Alina sat with the other girls in a dimly lit corridor, each of them dressed in glittering gowns, waiting for something. Then, it happened. A scream, sharp, sudden, tore through the hallway. Everyone froze. The sound came from one of the bedrooms down the hall. Moments later, the door flew open and a girl stumbled out, sobbing, clutching her arm. Her makeup was smeared, her dress torn at the strap. Behind her, a guard stepped out and barked, "Shut her up or it will be worse." Alina's blood turned cold. The girl, Sasha, sank to the floor, gasping, "They beat me because I said no. I just said no." Alina wanted to help her, to run to her side, but the guard's eyes scanned the room like wolves. No one dared to move. The silence was suffocating, broken only by Sasha's choked sobs. For the first time, Alina realized the doors were locked from the outside. There was no walking away, no calling for help. Even the windows had bars. She glanced at the guards, their rifles slung casually over their shoulders, and felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. "That's when I knew," Alina later said. "This wasn't a party anymore. This was a prison, and we were not guests. We were property." She thought about her passport, her phone, the NDA she had signed. What if she tried to run? Where could she go, barefoot, in a strange country, surrounded by desert? That night she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, her body tense, listening to every sound, footsteps in the hallway, muffled voices, the occasional cry from another room. Each noise made her flinch. The glamorous fantasy of Dubai had shattered completely. In its place was the slow, suffocating realization that she was trapped and that something much darker was waiting for her just beyond the next door. The next evening, the villa came alive, but not in a way that comforted anyone. The hallway lights glowed dim gold, shadows stretching across the marble floors. The guards' boots echoed as they herded the girls into the main hall, one by one. The room looked like a scene from a royal banquet, a long table glittering with gold cutlery, silver platters of food, crystal glasses catching the candlelight. Music played softly, the kind meant to sound elegant, but under these circumstances felt sinister. Alina stood near the wall, her hands clasped tightly, forcing herself to breathe. There were more men here tonight, at least a dozen, dressed in pristine white conjuras, some laughing, some already drinking. Their confidence was unsettling. These were not ordinary partygoers. They were predators circling their prey. One by one, the men began to move, inspecting the girls as if they were choosing horses at an auction. Some gestured with a flick of the wrist, others simply pointed. Guards took those chosen and led them away through side doors. The air grew heavier with every passing minute. Alina's heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. She watched a girl in front of her being taken by two men at once, her face pale as chalk. Moments later, faint screams echoed from somewhere behind the walls. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. When one of the guests noticed a girl trembling too hard to stand, he laughed, a sharp, cruel sound, and motioned for two guards. They dragged her to the floor and hit her across the face in full view of everyone. Blood ran from her nose, staining the expensive carpet. "You are here for their pleasure," one guard growled, his voice ice cold. "Resist again, and it will be worse." That was the moment Alina felt her last illusion collapse. This was no glamorous night. This was a marketplace of human bodies. Then it was her turn. One of the men, tall and broad-shouldered, pointed directly at her. He was dressed in white robes, his face calm, almost bored, as if this was nothing more than routine. Alina's knees nearly buckled. A guard's hand gripped her shoulder, forcing her forward. She was led down a corridor to a locked door. It opened with a heavy click. Inside, the music was quieter, the lights lower. "Sa!" That was the name she heard someone whisper, looked at her and smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile that makes your stomach turn. He gestured to two more girls to follow and then shut the door. What happened next was worse than anything Alina had feared. It wasn't just rape, she would later say, her voice flat. It was cruelty for amusement. They were slapped, dragged by the hair, forced to do things she cannot even bring herself to describe. The men recorded them on their phones, laughing, saying they loved breaking newcomers. When one of the girls screamed too loud, Saw struck her so hard she collapsed, blood running down her chin. Alina stayed quiet. She stayed still. Inside, she was screaming, but she knew that any resistance would only make it worse. When the door finally opened, she could barely stand. Her makeup was ruined, her dress torn, her body shaking. She stumbled back into the hallway and saw other girls returning, to all of them broken, silent, some crying so hard they couldn't breathe. That night, Alina didn't just fear for her safety, she feared for her life. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. By the third night, Alina's fear had turned into a constant, gnawing weight in her chest. But nothing could have prepared her for what they called the special evening. The girls were told to gather in the largest hall of the villa, a room she hadn't seen before. It was colder here, the air heavy with the smell of incense. The marble floor gleamed under the glow of too many candles. Guards lined the walls, silent, rifles in hand. And then the ceremony began. Two men dragged a live goat into the center of the hall. Alina froze where she stood. The animal bleated weakly, its hooves scraping against the floor. One of the sheiks stepped forward with a blade, smiling as if this were entertainment. "Watch," a guard ordered. Alina wanted to look away, but she didn't dare. The knife flashed once. The sound of the animal's throat being cut filled the room, wet, gurgling. Blood splashed across the floor, running in dark streams toward the girls' feet. Some of the girls screamed, others sobbed, but no one moved. A guard shouted at them to be quiet. "That was the moment I almost fainted," Alina later said. They laughed, all of them, like it was a joke. They said this was for power, for purity, and if we disobeyed, we'd be next. As the goat's body twitched on the ground, the men toasted with glasses of liquor, stepping deliberately through the blood. The music started, not party music this time, but something low, rhythmic, almost ritualistic. And then the night truly began. The men, some of them already drunk, began choosing girls again. But this time it was different, more violent, more frenzied, as if the slaughter had awakened something dark in them. Alina was grabbed by the wrist and dragged into a side room along with two others. What followed was hours of cruelty. They were beaten, humiliated, forced into acts she could barely bring herself to speak of. When it was finally over, Alina collapsed in a corner, her body trembling, tears mixing with blood on her face. Outside, she could still hear screams and laughter. That night, she whispered, "I stopped hoping it was going to end well. I realized we might not leave this place alive." By dawn, the girls were forced to get up, put on fresh clothes, and smile as though nothing had happened. The guards stood by, watching them like hawks. The message was clear: resist, and you die. Submit, and maybe, just maybe, you survive. After the ritual night, something inside Alina snapped. The fear didn't go away, but it turned into determination. She realized there were only two outcomes: escape or disappear like the others. She began to watch everything more carefully. The VO's layout, the guards' routines, which doors stayed locked and which ones opened, when they smoked, when they got lazy. Days passed in a haze of forced parties and silent dread. The girls were ordered to smile, laugh, behave as if nothing was wrong. Alina did as she was told, but inside, she was counting seconds. Her chance came unexpectedly. One of the sheiks, younger, softer spoken than the others, seemed to take a particular interest in her. He liked that she didn't resist. He called her obedient, praised her for not crying as much as the others. Alina swallowed her rage and played along, pretending to be grateful. "I became the perfect doll," she would later say, "because I knew that was the only way to get close enough to make a move." One evening, he invited her to his private lounge away from the others. There were no guards inside this time, just him, lounging on a sofa, scrolling through his phone. Alina saw her chance. She asked shyly if she could call a friend back home, just for a moment, to prove she was loyal, that she wasn't planning to run. He hesitated, then smirked, handing her the phone as if rewarding a pet. Her hands trembled as she typed. The message was short, almost cryptic, but enough. "Help. I am a prisoner. Villa near Dubai, plus 25. She included everything she could remember, landmarks she had glimpsed through the car window, details of the property. Then she hit send, praying it went through before he took the phone back. For the next 2 days, nothing happened. Alina barely slept, waiting for a sign, dreading that her message had been ignored, or worse, intercepted. Every time the guards looked at her for too long, she feared they knew. But then, on the third night, something shifted. A commotion broke out near the front gate. Shouting. The sound of cars arriving. Guards running. That was the moment I knew, Alina said. If I didn't act now, I might never get another chance. She slipped out of the room where the girls were kept, keeping her head down, following the sound of chaos toward the back of the villa. And there, past the kitchen, past the storage rooms, she found it. A low wall. Not unguarded, but less watched than the main gate. Her heart pounded as she kicked off her shoes. Run, she told herself. Run now or die here. And she climbed. Alina's palms were slick with sweat as she hoisted herself up the wall. The stone was rough, tearing at her skin, but she didn't dare stop. Behind her, voices were shouting, guards calling to each other, radios crackling. She froze for a split second, heart hammering, then pulled herself over the edge and dropped hard onto the sand outside. The ground was cold and uneven, cutting into her bare feet. She didn't feel it. Adrenaline numbed everything. She ran. Through the darkness, past trees and fences, her breath loud in her own ears. Every sound, the snapping twig, a distant shout, made her flinch. She was sure they'd see her, sure a guard would appear behind her at any moment. The villa's lights faded behind her, swallowed by the night. She didn't know where she was going. There were no street signs, no taxis, only empty desert roads and the faint hum of distant traffic. But she kept running, every step fueled by the single thought. Don't get caught. Don't go back. Finally, after what felt like hours, she saw headlights. A car approaching from the distance. She stumbled into the road, waving her arms, sobbing, almost collapsing in front of it. The driver slammed the brakes and jumped out, a local man, startled by the sight of a young woman in torn clothes, barefoot, bleeding, crying for help. At first, he hesitated, fear flashing across his face. Please, Alina begged. Embassy, police, anyone. Something in her voice must have convinced him. He let her in, drove her to a nearby town, and helped her contact her country's embassy. Alina was shaking the entire time, terrified that the guards would come for her, that she'd be dragged back before she could leave the country. But within hours, embassy staff arranged for her evacuation. When the plane finally took off, Alina looked down at the glittering city one last time. The lights of Dubai looked beautiful from the sky, cold, distant, and touchable. She was free, but she knew others were still locked behind those walls. Back home, Alina wasn't free, not really. Her body was safe, but her mind was still trapped inside that villa. She jumped at sudden noises. She couldn't sleep without nightmares dragging her back to those nights of screams, blood, and locked doors. Her bruises faded, but the fear stayed. For weeks, she told no one. She hid her face online. Her OnlyFans page went silent. She was ashamed, terrified people would blame her for going in the first place, terrified that the Sheik's network would find her and drag her back. But silence became unbearable. One day, she saw a news article about another girl, a model, who had gone missing after a similar trip. The headline felt like a punch to the chest. She realized it wasn't just her story. There were others. And that's when she decided to speak. At first, she did it anonymously. A journalist from Scandinavia was investigating human trafficking in the Gulf states, and Alina agreed to meet him in secret. For hours, she told him everything, the parties, the guards, the rituals, the beatings. The interview spread like wildfire. People online were shocked. Some called her brave. Others called her a liar. The modeling world buzzed with speculation, with some girls privately messaging her to say they'd been through the same thing, but were too scared to speak. A few weeks later, Alina did something that would make her story impossible to ignore. She went public. She revealed her face, her name, and told the world, I am not afraid anymore. If I stay silent, they win. And I can't let that happen. But there was still one part of her story she hadn't told. A part that was darker. A part that involved someone she loved, and someone who would never come back. For a long time, Alina kept one name out of every interview, Natasha. Natasha wasn't just another model. She was Alina's closest friend, the one person who understood everything she had been through. The two had shared flights, hotel rooms, whispered fears about the first Dubai trips. They had even promised each other they'd quit together one day. But Natasha never got the chance. In February 2025, she vanished. At first, Alina wasn't worried. Maybe Natasha had just taken a break, or gone on another trip and lost internet connection. But a week passed. Then two. No replies to messages. No calls. The silence was too loud to ignore. Finally, Alina heard from a mutual acquaintance. Natasha had been invited back to Dubai. She'd accepted. That's when the panic set in. Alina knew exactly what that meant. She tried to reach her again, begged her to be careful, but the messages went unanswered. Days later, news broke online, just a single, brief headline: unidentified woman found hanged in Dubai apartment. Police rule suicide. There were no photos, no names, no follow-ups. The article vanished from the web within hours. But the description, the age, the build, the small tattoo on the victim's arm, it all matched Natasha. I knew it was her, Alina said, her voice breaking. I just knew. Authorities called it suicide, but Alina refuses to believe it. Natasha had plans, contracts, dreams. She was about to speak out. She had even told Alina she had photos and videos from inside the villa and wanted to give them to journalists. She was scared, Alina said, but she was ready to fight. She wasn't the kind of girl to give up, not like that. Natasha's family was given a single piece of paper, a death certificate with no details. The body was buried quickly, without independent investigation. No autopsy results were released. Alina believes it wasn't suicide at all, it was a message. They wanted everyone to see what happens to girls who talk too much, she said. They killed her, then staged it to look like she did it herself. And then they erased her from the internet, as if she never existed. For Alina, Natasha's death was the breaking point. The guilt was crushing. She was my friend. I told her to be careful, but I also told her not to be afraid. And she kept going. And now she's gone. Alina's voice trembled as she said the words that would stay with every listener long after the interview ended. They can call it suicide all they want, but I know the truth, and I will never forgive them. If this story shook you, don't let it disappear into silence. Subscribe, like, and share so more people hear Alina's warning, and maybe we can stop the next girl from stepping into the same trap.